Okay, we're back with number 4, part 4, soul-to-soul connection. And this particular part here is probably my favorite compromise. And I'm going to kind of start it off this way. I think in a soul-to-soul connection, what's happening with many people is they are beginning to develop the 4 aspects that I'm talking about: navigate, communicate, negotiate, and compromise. But again, it's like this huge learning curve that we're beginning to address. And I kind of saved this part for the last video because I think it's become a very important issue, especially in a soul-to-soul connection. One of the components that I've noticed that happens in just about every soul-to-soul connection at this particular point in time is, besides the euphoria, there is automatically, in the last few years, the activation of the heart center, and of course the proverbial Kundalini awakening. One of the things that I have noticed over the years also, and even getting into this year, is we have more and more people on the planet awakening to the heart center chakra. I also have noticed we have a lot of people, including myself, who really don't know how to use it all that well or very efficiently at the moment. And that's all part of the learning curve. And I also feel that at this particular point in time, the powers that be are arranging more and more of these heart center chakra connections, soul-to-soul connections, for the explicit purpose. Let me try that one again. For the explicit purpose of activating the heart center chakra, and it's taking 2 people to do it in the variations that we have on the planet, and evoking a feeling of love and all the rest that goes along with it. And they're doing it that way simply because there's no other options. And I say that because for thousands of years we have been conditioned, trained, and yes, brainwashed to perceive relationships as they are now based on culture, race, country, and belief systems. And they're manifesting in that way. So the only way that we can actually evolve, because in our society, the whole basis of our society, everything that holds our society together, is basically on one premise and one premise only: relationships. So what would be the only way that the creator or source, whatever you want to call it, could arrange for us to move into a higher vibration? And that is to take us to a higher vibrational connection. In order to do that, we would have to move our level of consciousness that we've been expressing a great deal of our consciousness from the emotional center to the heart center. So the learning curve that we're going through now is actually moving beyond the emotional experience of love, relationship, and sexuality, as it has been, and there will be people who will disagree with me on that statement, to the spiritual soul-to-soul connection that's manifesting on the planet, which is a connection and activation of the heart center chakra. The most important thing here, and the idea of compromise, is as we're making this transition, what is happening is, and a great many of you have experienced it, it's going to sound like I'm off topic here for a minute, but I am going somewhere with this. Trust me. What's happening with a great many of us right now, irrespective of whether we have a soul-to-soul connection with someone right now or not, is we're transitioning. And what I mean by transitioning is that a great many of us are now expressing our feelings in a different way. Now, feelings can come under positive feelings or negative feelings, destructive feelings, dysfunctional feelings. It all come under the same label. But what happened now is predominantly the energy of our feelings, which was centered and located for the greater part in the solar plexus chakra, and most of you can agree with me on that point, I think, is now transitioning to being expressed through this newly activated heart center awakening that's going on in a mass number on the planet. So we are now expressing all of our feelings, for most of us, not so much here anymore, but we're transitioning to here. And some of us are in between. We're in between here in the solar plexus and the heart center, and we're up and down like the proverbial toilet seat on different occasions. So what happens is basically, in some cases, we're now expressing, for example, sadness, depression, anger can now be still expressed as a feeling, but now instead of expressing here in the solar plexus, it's expressing here in the heart center. Now, when we start expressing things through the heart center, we see things differently because we feel things differently. This opens up our intuitive abilities. This opens up our empathic abilities to be more connected to other people and all people everywhere. And if you're any kind of an empathic, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So what happens is, for example, with the word compromise. Compromise simply means that you reach some kind of an agreement between yourself and another person where there's been give and take on both sides, and you've come and reached a happy medium, all right? And in some cases, what happened in our old way of doing things, which is still manifesting, sometimes we had to go to war and kill hundreds of thousands of people before we realized that war accomplished nothing. So we finally sit down at a table, and then begrudgingly, in most cases, we compromise with the other party or the other side, and we come to some kind of begrudging agreement that makes it livable for both sides after thousands of people have died. That's on a much bigger picture type scale. But if you filter it down and realize that in many cases, in the old cases of relationships, what happens is from the old template, what happens nowadays when a relationship, a good number of them, not all of them, there are good relationships, but statistically, marriages are not lasting very long, 2 or 3 years at most, and about 52 or 53% of them end up in divorce in the first 3 or 4 years. That's a great income for lawyers. And in many cases, not all, more of the empathic people are now open to new avenues, while the person they may have been married with or in the old template relationship with wants to turn it into a pure sex brawl. This is the old way of doing things. Very difficult to compromise with a person like that unless you use different tools. And the different tools are, again, you have to get into a situation where you can go into the heart center chakra and you can see. Now, when I say see, what I'm trying to convey to people here is the imaginative faculty is a gift. The imaginative faculty combined with direct combination of the heart center chakra, which is source creative energy, if you magnetize and energize a visual presentation in the heart center chakra, like a movie or a living thing that you see, which is what you do all the time. You cannot think without seeing, but if you do it in the heart center chakra, you can actually expedite a process that is going nowhere and turning into a pure sex brawl. So what you've done is you have created a compromise that is amenable to both sides of the situation, even though the one person may be very anal retentive and want to turn it into a pure sex brawl. Again, a person can attempt and do this in a given situation. Now, the situation also too is if you take the word compromise and you are in a soul-to-soul connection with someone and it's not going well, for example, you're in the situation of the he said, she said, and the buttons are getting pushed, and you realize that somewhere along the line, if it's going to continue, you have to ask yourself, first of all, do you want it to continue? And then I suggest the next thing you do is find out if the other person wants it to continue. And if one of you doesn't, then let it go, for the time being at least, until you know for sure what's going. And if the two people are in agreement, that they want to continue the soul-to-soul connection because they find it's viable, they need to learn how to compromise with each other. And when I say compromise, this needs to be done from the heart center chakra. That's one of the main reasons why we have these soul-to-soul connections taking place. A lot of people think, oh, it's to meet your soulmate, or you meet your twin flame, or your twin ray, or your... Oh God, it just goes on and on with these friggin' labels. What happens is the soul-to-soul connection is for the purpose of soul evolution, period, under many different formats and expressions thereof in the growth. And we need to learn how to now, as we're transitioning from the old way of expressing. Let me give you an example. What I've seen many times when I put up information, for example, that actually I always try to express most of it coming from the heart center chakra. And in some cases, what happens is I touch upon a person's belief systems, and the belief systems are very deeply ingrained. What do? They're going to go into the defense mode, then they're going to go into the attack mode, because I've challenged their belief system. So they're not open, they're closed, and they will do anything possible to defend that. That person is not manifesting from the heart, because if you're manifesting from the heart, you don't have a belief system that you're locked into any longer. Yes, you've allowed belief systems to fall apart, but yes, you will take on new belief systems as you let them go. But what happens is, unlike the person I just mentioned, or people like that, you're not attached to a belief system. At any given moment, you're prepared to let it go and be open to new concept. This is when the idea of compromise, communicate, navigate, negotiate, becomes very, 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 very successful, I might add, because now it's being done through the heart center chakra, and it's being done in that fashion because the person has transitioned either permanently to expressing their feelings, and I mean all of their feelings, through the heart center predominantly, as opposed to expressing a good majority of it from the solar plexus. The old state of consciousness that we've had on this planet is redundant. It needs to go the way of the dodo bird, all right? Our society, and there's good things about our society, and there's a lot of negative things about our society that need to be changed and evolved. We're moving into a higher vibrational connection and understanding of consciousness. And compromise with other individuals is a very key thing that we're all going to have to learn how to do. But in order for us to get along with our neighbor, in order for us to get along with our friends, in order for us to get along with our spouses or our partners or our soul-to-soul connection, we all need to be able to make compromises. And those compromises remains that we simply have openness, and the openness in compromise can be expressed from the heart center as it's become stationary there. And when you're willing to compromise, you're willing to look, listen, and feel what the other person has to say, and then perceive it and kind of negotiate and communicate with the person so that the compromisation can take place between the two of you. When we do this specifically from the heart center chakra, we're expressing compromise, but we're doing it in a different way. Not the old way, where we had to kill 200,000 or 300,000 people or 1 million people, and then begrudgingly sit down and compromise because we can't continue the war because it's costing too much and too many people are dying or too many people are starving. That's the old way. And if you take the old way and you filter that down, you can see that in all levels of our society, but in different perspectives. It's there all the time. Compromise. It needs to be done in the heart center. Navigate. Needs to be done in the heart center. Negotiate. Needs to be done through the heart center. Compromise through the heart center. And it means that each individual who goes into the bubble love phase, when you're in the bubble love phase, you know automatically how to do all of those things because you did it. Because everything went so smoothly. You didn't even see it. There was no fighting. There was no arguing. There was no push my buttons, push your buttons. There was total union going on between the two of you. That potential is still there. Why did it happen in the bubble love? Because you cannot and could not go into the bubble love phase unless both of the heart centers of the both individuals, or the one, was fully illumined for a period of time to take you there so that you could see the gift that has been given to humanity and how to friggin' well use it at a later time. And this is what is happening now. So our society, as it is now, is changing and evolving. We're now into that learning curve where we're learning to compromise. Even compromising with yourself, all right? Stop being so rigid in many cases with yourself. Stop beating yourself if you screw up or you make a mistake. Making a mistake is a beautiful thing. I make them all the time. But what I don't do is try to do the same mistake twice. Once is enough. And I attempt to learn from it by compromising and understanding, yes, these are learning curves that I'm going through. So I compromise with the learning curve and go with the flow of what's being expressed. So compromise is a very important phase. Like anything else, it can be expressed from the heart center, and it's much different when it's expressed there. Again, if you're in a soul-to-soul connection, and the both of you are in agreement, you want it to work, then compromise. See the compromise taking place within the heart center chakra. Look at it like a movie. See the issue or the problem or the whatever it is that's come up, and then see yourself working through it, compromising, give a little, let a little, give a little, let a little, and what happens is you'll compromise. What happens, this changes the whole dynamics of the energy, and you start drifting back up into the bubble love. Many times I've seen people, what happens is when they've been in a soul-to-soul connection, and I'm not using the other label, all right? After a period of time, they'll say to me, geez, Mel, we kind of went through a little bit of phase of growth, and bang, we're right back into the bubble love. Yeah, that's exactly what's supposed to happen, all right? When you make some progress, you drift back into the bubble love phase again. It can be done by an individual, or it can be by a couple. And here's the good part. It can be done by a group of people. It can be done by a country. It can be done by a small town. It can be done by a big city or a small city. We need to take off the blinders and start seeing the big picture of what's happening when we have these gifts and these blessings of soul-to-soul connections that are being presented to us. All right? When we stop seeing it in the aspect of the old belief system, oh goody, it's a relationship that's probably pending because it has to be because it's so intense. That's just your conscious self based on old belief systems expressing what you think it is in that perspective. But it's so much more. Compromise from the heart. It's the only way to go. Thank you, everybody.